Fulton coming to you on a Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us. It'll be a full cast of Mic'd Up with Jake and Fulton for about an hour today. I will be heading down south to Joplin, Missouri for a little Washburn men's and women's basketball. So we continue the trend of not having both of us here.
I promise
for
every listener and watcher, a week will come where it is Jake and I, like normal, for 5 days. This is not that week.
It is definitely not that week.
It's what, 3 straight weeks now, or at some point during the week?
Pretty much.
Oh, boy.
We got a lot to get to on this edition of Mic'd Up. We're going to talk Chiefs pass rush. Low key, there is one reason why the pass rush has gotten better, and boy, is that a fantastic development. But also, it relies on specifically one individual, and it's no surprise, it's Chris Jones. We'll get to that. We'll talk a little Chiefs when it comes to the wild card, who we would like to see. Major League Baseball could be changing its entire television structure. There's some good. I think there's also some bad to that. We'll get into that. We're going to talk with Jesse Newell. We'll talk with Paul Myerberg. We'll talk a little NFL. K-State got some news today. Felix Anudike-Uzomah. We appreciate the effort. He is heading to the NFL. We'll get to plenty of that coming up today here on Mic'd Up. As always, hit us up on our Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429. Outside of Topeka, 785-272-9429. Let us know. Give us your thoughts. You can check us out on YouTube. Go to our website. Very simple, very easy. 580wibw.com. It's 580wibw.com. Go to YouTube. Check us out in the comment section as well. Love to get your thoughts coming up today on this edition of Mic'd Up. Number one headline coming into this year, pass rush. We knew that. That is not a surprise. The way that they tried to improve the pass rush was, one, change their defensive line coach. Coach Cullen in, Brendan Daly out. He's now the linebackers coach. They went and they signed Carlos Dunlap. They went and they drafted George Karlaftis. They were expecting Chris Jones to improve, Frank Clark to improve, Mike Dana to improve. That is what they were hoping for. Well, the Kansas City Chiefs pass rush has improved. They are second in the NFL in sacks behind the Eagles, which had, honestly, one of the most impressive pass. I mean, they have 3 guys who have 10 sacks. That doesn't happen. That does not happen. But the Eagles' pass rush is excellent. But the Chiefs' pass rush, okay, it's gotten better as the year has gone on. Right now, you could say that the Kansas City Chiefs pass rush is coming off their best game in 3 years. The Chiefs defense generated their single game pressure rate of 45% over the last 3 years in week 18. Are you ready for this, folks? The Chiefs pass rush is elite in the last 5 weeks. Weeks 1 through 13, we were wondering, are they going to get after the quarterback? Well, they weren't. According to the Next Gen stats, 25% quarterback pressure rate. That's 26th in the NFL. That was not good. Weeks 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, they're at 35%, which is 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5th. That is getting after the quarterback. And there really is one reason why, a big reason why, that the Kansas City Chiefs are getting after the quarterback more often in the last 5 weeks. It's because George Karlaftis and Chris Jones are getting after the quarterback at an elite rate right now in the last 5 weeks. This is incredible what George Karlaftis has done since the Kansas City Chiefs have played the Rams. George Karlaftis has a sack, either a half sack or a sack, in 6 of his last 7 games. And you're thinking, wow, that's really good. It's because it is. At the midway point, Fulton, we were like, yo, Georgie boy, we had you pegged at an over-under of 5.5, and you had
half
a sack.
The under betters felt great.
Yes.
You
yes,
were an over better. You were sweating the collar.
But he kept on improving. Against the Rams, he had a sack and a tackle for loss. Against Cincinnati, he had a sack, 3 tackles, and a tackle for loss. Against Denver, a sack, 2 tackles, a tackle for loss. Houston, the one game in which the defense dominated. Now, remember, it went into overtime because of, turnovers, special teams, etc. He did not have a sack. Seattle, a sack. Denver, a sack. This last game against the Raiders had a half a sack. He has figured it out. It took a little bit. That's why pass rushers who are not top 10 picks takes a little bit. But that is what George Karlaftis has done. He is slowly but surely becoming a factor for this Kansas City Chiefs pass rush. 1 sack a game is you're a Hall of Famer. You're a Hall of Famer. If you get a sack a game, you're a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, pretty much. For the most part.
What George Karlaftis has done now in his rookie year with 6 sacks. We had said if he gets 6 to 7 sacks, that's a great year for the 31st pick in the NFL draft. But it's not just that. He's also getting tackles for loss. He has a tackle for loss in 7 straight games. That's not including the sack aspect of it.
No, that's just making plays in the backfield on running backs and other things.
That is huge. Also, he's getting to the quarterback and he's knocking down the quarterback. Yep. He's got a QB hit in 6 of his last 7 games. So if you're keeping track, here is what George Karlaftis is basically doing every single game. He is getting a sack. He is getting a tackle for loss, and he is knocking the quarterback down. Oh, and he still is batting down balls like no one else as a rookie that is done. He's also not playing but 60% of the snaps. Think about that. He's playing 60% of the snaps right now. 64% against the Raiders, 51, 41, 51, 61. He's playing in 60% of the snaps and is still getting a sack, a tackle for loss, and a QB hit. That is a rookie who is starting to figure it out. We were wondering who was going to help out Chris Jones. We knew Chris Jones was going to have a big year this year. You knew that was going to be the case. You could tell afterwards, this year, one was a contract year for Chris Jones, and I would hope that they're going to extend him. I don't care if he is 30 years old. Brett Veach, you cannot go forward without Chris Jones. But he was excellent. And now you're starting to get that second complimentary pass rusher in Chris Jones. It is no surprise that the Chiefs, their pressure rate has gone up from 26th to 5th over the last 5 games. A lot of it is because of George Karlaftis. But low-key, same situation. Mike Dana also getting after the quarterback. When you combine Dana, Clark, and Dunlap, those 3 guys, that's basically the equivalent of what Karlaftis has done the last 4 games. So if you are getting 3 guys, and I combine Dunlap and Dana and Frank Clark, you combine those 3 and convert them into Voltron, you have 3 guys who are getting after the quarterback. Not many teams have 3 guys getting after the quarterback because Dunlap has done that. Clark is doing that occasionally. And Mike Dana had a fantastic game against the Raiders.
Yeah, Mike Dana was great. Good. And we talk about it all the time. Complimentary pass rush is the key. I want to make this note on George just because it delights me so much. Hey, Jake, where do you think George Karlaftis ranks among rookies in sacks this year?
He's second behind Hutchinson, right?
He is third. He is third. Aiden is first with 9.5.
He had a great year.
Low-key, James Houston, a 6th round pick of Detroit, is second with 8. And then you have George Karlaftis with 6.
I would love to know what's his name? The rookie?
James Houston.
James Houston.
Linebacker officially is probably like an outside linebacker, speed rusher type guy, I have to assume. Oh, man, I've watched a lot of Lion football.
Here's one of the reasons why I'm interested in this, because in one game, he got 3 sacks.
That's the key.
I would rather have a guy get a sack a game than 3 sacks in one game, because to me, kudos to the Lions and kudos to James Houston. I'm not saying that's bad. It's James Houston found a guy that he took advantage of, and that game was against the Chicago Bears.
Exactly. And no, I think you're right, because we talked about it last year with Chandler Jones.
Yeah. He had 5 sacks in one game.
And then everything else petered off. Game by game is important. That's the thing with George. But here's what I like. This is why I enjoy, and I think Chiefs fans need to appreciate what he's been able to do. George Karlaftis has more sacks than Kayvon Thibodeau. George Karlaftis has more sacks than the number 1 overall pick, Trayvon Walker, which was the stupidest thing Jacksonville ever did. I'm just laughing. There are a few guys taken ahead of him. Not many, a few, because George still was a first-round pick. He is performing at that top level, but even if you look at Aiden Hutchinson, who has played great. I want to take nothing away from Aiden.
Yeah, he's really good.
He was a top pick and the right choice for Detroit. 5 of his 9.5 have come in 2 games.
Really?
He has a 3-sack game and a 2-sack game. 5 of his 9.5 come in. Now, Grant, 2 of those sacks came against Green Bay in the final week of the season. So an important time for Aiden to show up, and he's done a lot of other good things. But that same point, though, the 2 guys ahead of him have had big individual sack days. George Karlaftis has never had a big sack day, but it's consistent contributions and consistent work. I'm not saying that makes George better than any of those guys ahead of him. I'm not saying it's going to make George one of the best pass rushers out of this draft. But we've talked about it a lot. Would you rather take a guy who has high sack totals, but it's only in a couple games, or the guy that never has the high individual game total, but it's over a bunch of a longer stretch? And I think we're seeing the difference, because what Karlaftis is doing is really, because that was the thing for me when it came to Chris Jones and watching this defense play. Chris Jones was always going to game wreck. And that's the way this year was going to go. But when only he was winning, and we've talked about this at length, when only one guy wins, it's really easy to escape, because there's an escape valve in like 3 different locations. But when this Chiefs pass rush has hit its stride, it's because not only is Chris Jones winning, but Mike Dana is winning, but George Karlaftis is winning, but Frank Clark is winning. So that quarterback, that we've always talked about, Joe Burrow's kind of the guy we think about when it comes to the Chiefs pass rush, because Jones always wins against Cincinnati. But Joe still never gets touched because he's got somewhere else to go.
And that's why these last 5 weeks, Dana with 2 sacks in the game. If you combine Dana, Dunlap, and Clark as one, and then Karlaftis, what he's doing, and then Chris Jones, that is 3 guys that are rushing the passer. And that is why you have the 5th best quarterback pressure rate in the last 5 games.
Complementary pass rush is huge.
And if you think about what the Chiefs have done defensively over the last 5 games,
they've looked good.
They've looked very good. The biggest game that they struggled with, when it just look at points, okay? We're just going to look at points. It would have been the Broncos game. But we all remember, in the Broncos game, they got 6 sacks. That wasn't the pass rush. That wasn't. That was the secondary. And I'm talking about the first time that they played the Broncos.
Yeah. Second time, too, they had some issues, but as I like to point out with that game, first game under interim head coach, those historically for any team that gets played are hard games to do, because it just always is different. You know.
So I look at this Chiefs defense. The question was the pass rush. They are improving drastically. The last 5 games, this is a pass rush that is viable. It is legit, because you've got your 2 guys that you brought in. One has finally figured it out, and it's going to take a rookie time to figure it out. And then the other one, combining Dunlap, Dana, because Mike Dana's got 5 sacks this year.
Yeah.
Mike Dana getting 5 sacks this year is exactly what you were hoping for. Exactly what you were hoping for.
You needed him to be a piece of a 3-person rotation that created one pass rusher, because that's what seemed like the Chiefs were trying to do. And Mike Dana's done his job. When healthy, he's done his job.
But I thought this was interesting. Chris Jones, he's the motor. Chris Jones in wins this year for the Chiefs. So the Chiefs went 14-3.
Yep.
In wins, Chris Jones has 14.5 sacks, which is basically a sack per game, and almost 70 pressures, which is almost 5 per game. In the losses to the Colts, the Bills, the Bengals, he has 1 sack and 8 total pressures in 3 games. If Chris Jones plays well, the D-line plays well,
the defense plays well,
and the defense plays well. Chris Jones is the MJ. Chris Jones is the Mahomes of the defensive side. If he plays well, there's pretty much a guarantee that the defense is going to play well. Chris Jones is that important to this defense. And this is a big postseason for Chris Jones. Chris Jones has 0 sacks in the postseason. Sacks are, as we've talked about this, very up and down.
They're volatile.
Very inconsistent. But if you are Chris Jones, the one thing you didn't do last year was get the guy on the ground. Narratives are something that are real. Look at the MVP race. Look at Patrick Mahomes. Look at Tyreek Hill, all that. If Chris Jones goes another postseason without a sack, that's a problem. Do you have to get sacks? No. But if you are elite, you are the guy, you're defensive player of the year talking to, in the conversation, because I think he's like 3rd right now or 4th, behind Parsons and Bosa.
Yeah.
You got to get the sack. You do. Like, one, I think it'll help Chris Jones just to get that monkey off of his back. But if he plays well and he gets quarterbacks on the ground and he gets pressure, this Chiefs defense is good. Then when you get Karlaftis and you get everybody else, then you become a top 5 pass rush. Didn't think that would happen this year, but it has here as of late. Coming up next, Andy Reid on the bye. How big is that when it comes to who they face? We'll get to that coming up here on Mic'd Up. 1 o'clock hour, I will be heading south to Joplin, Missouri, where Fulton, you've been there. There's cold as hell that one day in Joplin, Missouri.
Yeah, I just sat in a booth for 3 hours.
We'll have a little Washburn Hoops on our sister station, Country 106.9. I'll be heading down there. So Fulton will be taking over in the 1 o'clock hour. We will rank, and I've got my opponents for Wild Card Weekend.
Thank you for putting that in there, so that way I knew what you were wanting to think.
Who I am feeling, as well as Major League Baseball. They might be finally coming to the 21st century.
Took them long enough. And they'll still screw it up.
They ain't there yet.
No, they definitely are not.
But there is some rumors that the regional sports networks, the Bally's, formerly Fox Sports Kansas City, formerly the Royal Sports Network, remember RSN? Remember way back in the day?
I'm old enough to remember that.
Might not be around, and Major League Baseball might be doing something a little bit differently.
They might finally be, like we noted, moving into the late 20th century.
Yeah. Which they could still screw it up, but
they will.
It's a better product, I think, if they choose to do so. All you have to do is just get it out to your fans. The reason why the NFL is so king is for a lot of reasons, but one of them, it's so simple.
It's in every house
to watch.
Every Sunday in every house, you can guarantee there's 3 football games to watch.
Yeah.
Every Monday, there's a football game to watch in every household.
So simple.
Roughly every Thursday, there's a football game to watch in every household.
One of the reasons why, and I think we forget about this just because we're so spoiled by Andy Reid, but I wanted to point this out, that Andy Reid, after a bye,
it's absurd,
is 27-4.
You give that man an extra week to prepare.
27-4.
And it speaks to how organized I think he is, and more importantly, just the football teams he's had just have these cultures of being very together, very organized, very know what they're doing. And also, you just give Andy Reid an extra week
27-4
to prepare. It's crazy.
27-4.
That man don't lose off a bye.
That's incredible.
That man don't lose off a bye.
Jeez. You forget about that because right now
you do.
The numbers are, Patrick Mahomes against the AFC West. He hasn't lost a road game in the AFC West like that. But
his playoff record, but in reality, it's just
27-4.
Andy Reid off a bye. One of the greatest things in sports.
Coming up next, we'll talk a little college football with Paul Myerberg here on Mic'd Up. It is time for our Big 12 breakdown, brought to you by the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence, right there on Clinton Parkway and Castle. If you missed anything when it comes to the Hawks on the basketball court, well, this Saturday, you can watch it from the 23rd Street Brewery. KU versus Iowa State should be a lot of fun there in Lawrence. On the hardwood, well, on the gridiron, I know we said we would talk to him for the last time last week, but we got to get more insight from the man who knows college football better than anybody. He is Paul Myerberg from USA Today. Follow him on Twitter at Paul Myerberg. Paul, thank you for coming in for a little extra time, a little overtime with us to talk a little college football and the national championship game. Was it really a national championship game? Does that actually count as a national championship game?
Yeah, technically it counts. But we're pretty clear in a consensus now that the national championship game was really the Peach Bowl, because you look at this Georgia team, for Ohio State to come within a 50-yard field goal that probably should have been like a 44 or 45-yard field goal if they hadn't botched it. That's about as close as anybody was going to get to beat these Bulldogs. So TCU can take a little bit of solace, not very much, but hopefully someone took a picture of the scoreboard at 10-7 in the first quarter, and they can put that up in their football facility. Let's not let them talk about 65-7. It was, believe it or not, 10-7 at one point.
Was the worst thing to happen to TCU Ohio State playing Georgia? Because it felt like Georgia took Ohio State for granted. I think Georgia played with its food. We talk a lot about that. You know, I've got a 2.5-year-old, and he likes to play with his food every now and then. And that's what Georgia felt like they were doing with Ohio State. And then they got that out of their system. You know, the whole, wow, if we don't play like we can, we're going to get beat. And then they just came in, and it was just an absolute buzzsaw.
Yeah, there's an aspect of that to it. I remember speaking to someone from the SEC after the Peach Bowl. I was at the Fiesta, but just over on a text. And this person's insight was, I have been covering the SEC, or rather I've been in the SEC and seen these guys for a long time. I don't know if I've ever seen Kirby Smart as angry after a win as he was after Ohio State. Strange, because it's the playoff semis, not Missouri, not Kent State, but after Ohio State. So you were clued in at that point that Georgia was going to come in fired up. Sometimes you watch a football game, guys, whether you're on the couch or you're in a press box, you're in the stands, and you have a really good feeling by maybe even as early as the midway point of the first quarter, what way this game is going to go, and whether you can really just kind of sit down, relax, or leave the game and go to the parking lot. This game was over after about 5 plays. Legitimately, you saw after 2 series, a 3-and-out from TCU, a 5-play touchdown drive from Georgia, the gap in speed, athleticism, depth, experience, confidence was so profound that you knew that this was going to get ugly. I think TCU, to a degree, you're going to wear this 65-7 loss for a long time. They're going to be the answer to a trivia question for the next 100 years. But TCU should feel, to a degree, fortunate that it was only 65. Because if Georgia was 1989 Houston, or was coached by somebody else, or in a different environment, they could have put 80 on the dogs, on the Horned Frogs. So 65 is almost generous, considering what Georgia could have done to them if they had played everybody for all 60 minutes.
It's almost a catch-22 for me, Paul, when I look at that game, because I like it because it was a team that had no business at the beginning of the year being talked about making, let alone the playoff, but the title game. I mean, TCU was picked 7th in the Big 12. That shows that the non, get the 5-star, because I think, Georgia had like 25-star guys if you go from freshman to senior when they were recruited, and TCU had 1. It makes me feel good that, hey, you know what? You can get there. You can get to the national championship game without being the 5-star recruits. I mean, it is done. TCU got a seat at the table and made the playoff. And not only did that, they won a game. But it also makes me realize that they're at the table, but man, they can't eat at the same table, because that was a different team. Like it almost makes you go, you can get there, but you're probably not going to win. It's kind of like in the NFL. Hey, you can get to the Super Bowl with a mediocre quarterback. Look at Jimmy G. But you ain't winning the Super Bowl unless you got that guy. It kind of makes me feel both that, like Kansas State, they could make it to the college football playoff. I mean, if they don't lose to Tulane, and play with their food in that game, and then, they beat TCU, they could make it there, but they're still a ways away from maybe winning the whole thing.
Yeah, there were a couple of things, guys, that were said coming out of that game, or even during the game. One was that TCU did not deserve to be there. That's nonsense. That's absolutely ridiculous, and it's embarrassing the person who said it. TCU deserved to be there with their regular season, and this wasn't a semi. They beat the Big Ten champs, 13-0, a team that had been, let me do the math, 26-1 over the previous 2 years. They beat that team. They deserve to be there. But you're right. I left that game thinking a couple things. One, about Georgia. They're the team to beat, and they are going to be the team to beat for as long as Smart has this energy and this fire that he has. But yeah, you get to this moment, and for you to win a national championship as a TCU or a Kansas State, it's going to take a significant amount of luck about the matchup. You cannot expect to beat a Michigan and then come back 9 days later, play a Georgia, and win this game. You just don't have the bodies. So there's something a little bit discouraging about that. At the same time, look, the 12-team playoff is going to afford access every year to a Kansas State or a TCU. Every year, a team like that is going to get in. It's going to become even more difficult. Access is easier. Winning is going to be even more difficult. Imagine if you're TCU, you don't just have to beat Michigan and Georgia. You got to beat Michigan, and you got to beat, Clemson, and then you got to beat Georgia. It's just going to be such a hill and a mountain for these teams to climb that it's hard for me to say that any team that doesn't recruit at least in the ballpark of a Georgia and Alabama, meaning every year you're in the top 10, you're in the top 12, or in the top 8, I don't know how you win a national championship anymore, because the talent gap between number 1 and number 2 on Monday night was so obvious and so grand. I asked someone after the game, hey, how many quarters would it take TCU to score 66 points? The answer was, well, at least 5, right? Because they got 7 and 4. But I think it would probably take them 3 or 4 games, based off what I saw, to score 66 points against this Georgia team. It was just a bloodbath.
How many times, if they play 10 times, TCU and Michigan, if they play 10 times, what's the result? Is it 8 Michigan, 2 TCU, 7-3, 6-4, 5-5? What is it?
I think it's 7-3 Michigan. Yeah, I think you're right. 7-3. I think TCU caught them by surprise. Michigan ill prepared. If all things are equal, neutral field, I think 7-3 Michigan. I'll ask you guys. We watched that game. How many times would TCU have to play Georgia to get a win? If they played 100 times, they might beat them once or twice. I know that sounds ridiculous, but they played 100 times. I just don't know how they would ever beat this team.
No, hey Paul, I'm right there with you. As Paul Myerberg is our guest college football writer for USA Today, joining us for the Big 12 breakdown, brought to you by the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. If you want to watch any KU hoops action coming up this weekend, and down 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence, located at Clinton and Castle. All right, Paul, moving into some other news around the Big 12 today, and even the past couple weeks or so. First things first for our local teams here. Felix DK Uzama officially announced today that he will be headed to the NFL draft. Not a big surprise overall, given what he'd done in the time that he had been around. Just what's your thoughts on kind of looking back on what Felix had done, particularly really over the past 2 seasons, and what do you kind of think he could profile at for the next level, and what he could bring to one of the 32 NFL teams?
Yeah, I think he's not on the Deuce Vaughn level about a guy who in these 3 years as a Wildcat kind of transformed things, or at least brought eyeballs to the program. But look, his last 2 years, maybe the best edge rusher in the Big 12, one of the best in the Power 5, and the results and the production speak for itself. I know last year, I believe last year his numbers were a little bit better, and I might be wrong, but this year, obviously, his impact overall across the board was just absolutely irreplaceable for a defense that wasn't perfect, had really good moments, but overall was part of this package that led to a Big 12 championship and kind of a memorable season for the Wildcats. Looking forward, I mean, he plays a premium position. He's got premium production. I think he's going to test well, though I'm not quite sure about that. I think he's a guy that if he devotes himself and really develops his skills as a pass rusher, he could be a career NFL guy. I mean, we're talking 8 to 10 years in the league. So he's a very talented, very, very talented Power 5 player. And if you look ahead for Kansas State, we talked about this last week, replicating him, finding ways to match his impact, not with one guy, and it won't be maybe even with 2 guys, just like with Vaughn. It's going to take a team effort. It's just absolutely mandatory for Kansas State to match that impact in some way to help and bail out this defense on third down. So it's a big loss for Kansas State. I don't think any of us are surprised that he's leaving. But yeah, he leaves some really big shoes in Manhattan. They're going to need to piece together a pass rush without him, and it's going to be tough.
It truly will be. I'm right there with you, Paul. It's going to be tough to replicate what his production was, even if you're using multiple bodies at the spot, but we'll see what Chris Kleiman and company can do. Also with K-State and some news here, I'm glad you mentioned there, the same thing going to do offensive with Deuce Vaughn. Well, we got the first glimpse of what K-State might try to do as they landed former Florida State running back Trayshawn Ward through the transfer portal. He has announced that he is going to be transferring to Kansas State. You've watched a lot of college football all across the country there, Paul. You've probably watched a little bit of Trayshawn Ward over there at Florida State. First off, what do you think he could bring to Kansas State and how this can help them? They're never going to completely replace Deuce Vaughn, but this is the next step with him and DJ Giddens to try and make up for some of that gap. But overall, what kind of a statement do you think this makes that a not necessarily massively gigantic splash moment for Trayshawn Ward to come to Kansas State, but this is one of the bigger lands that Chris Kleiman's had through the transfer portal era. What kind of statement do you think this makes, as well as just where K-State stands as a destination for high-profile transfers?
Yeah, look, I think Kansas State, after losing Deuce Vaughn, or as they were aware that Deuce was going to go, as they began to reach out to guys around college football, Power 5 proven running back, this is a really desirable location. And I think you see it with Ward. Not a guy that I believe anyone in the Big 12 paid attention to. And to be quite fair, maybe not a guy that even if you're in the ACC is really your primary focus on Florida State, because a lot of focus obviously on Jordan Travis, their quarterback. But on a per snap, per play, per game basis, he is a highly, highly effective running back. To the point where you almost wondered, as I watched Florida State, even this past season and certainly last year, why Ward wouldn't get more touches. So to be fair, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it's like a physical issue. I don't think it's because he can't take the load. We're obviously going to find out. But in his career, when he got touches in games, he always produced. He was always over 50, 60, 75, even close to 100 yards when he would get his touches. So I'm intrigued by him as a guy, teaming with Giddens. Maybe Howard gets a little bit more involved in the running game and see if he can be someone who's at 5.5 to 6 or 6.1 yards per carry as he was with the Seminoles for the last 2 years. So very, very, very intriguing pickup that I don't think a lot of people are talking about at this point, but clearly picked up for a reason, and that is to get 200 carries a year to help carry this offense. And guys, I don't think he's going to be Deuce Vaughn, because Deuce Vaughn is a special guy, but he's a real talent. He truly is a real talent. And I think if as a recruit probably would not have sniffed Kansas State, but that's the beauty of the portal. You can pick up a guy like that, plug and play him, and I think if he stays healthy, he could be 1,000-yard back based off what we've seen the last 2 years.
I will say I do not watch a lot of Florida State football, Paul, but I watched a little bit this year, and I enjoy Mark Norvell as a coach. I did always one of the same thing as well of just why wouldn't Trayshawn Ward get those lots of touches? I think this is a tremendous gift for K-State. Really helps them going forward. Just a few more questions here for you, Paul. We're going to move to the Big 12 as a whole here, and the biggest thing for me looking at Big 12 football in this offseason, just before we get into the specifics, is there something odd happening at Oklahoma State? Because there's an exodus of staff and players this offseason. Just what do you make in general of what is going on down at Oklahoma State, just from a big picture perspective?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out ourselves if there's something in the water down there. Here's what we know. I can tell you guys that over the course of his career, Mike Gundy has run his program in a very unique way. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. The results speak for themselves. But in terms of how Oklahoma State has approached recruiting, talent development, evaluation, they've always gone about it a little bit unorthodox. They are, in a sense, much more like Kansas State than they are like Oklahoma, because they will look for guys who are under-recruited. They will find those guys, and more often than not, their hit rate is fantastic. But that's a credit to their coaching and their development. However, the last couple of years have not been good for Mike Gundy from a public perception perspective. And we've all seen it. We've seen it countless times. He's had to battle against this, that, and the other. He's had to step up and apologize for this and that. And I think that's had a little bit of a negative impact on his persona. And at the same time, I think the way he runs the program, a lot of guys are not accustomed to it, or at least are looking elsewhere to say, where can I have it a little bit easier? Where can I get out of this, maybe what I feel is a negative environment? I can't pinpoint any single thing, but we're looking right now at a mass exodus of assistant coaches to a degree, but primarily skilled talent offensive players. And that really would concern me if I'm a Cowboy fan. Oklahoma State has distanced itself and separated itself by being explosive on offense. They are historically very potent. They are multiple. They can focus on QBs. They can focus on the running game. At this point, I'm looking at their roster and thinking, I don't know who's going to play QB. I don't know who's going to catch the ball. I'm not even sure who's going to run it or block. So this is a very, very troubling development for me at Oklahoma State. I'm sorry I can't give you anything concrete, but we're certainly, as a staff and as a group, and I know other people are as well, just looking at what could possibly be going on that's different or beyond just a conflict of personality. I chalk it up to that as of now, but it wouldn't surprise me if in the next couple of weeks or months you hear something a little bit different that might give you a clearer picture. Not that his job is in danger whatsoever, but clearly there's something going on at Oklahoma State that is rubbing some players and coaches the wrong way, because this is not normal. To go from 5-0 to 7-6 and then lose this many guys, it definitely makes you raise your eyebrows a bit in the Big 12 and also nationally.
Yeah, hey, Paul, I'm not surprised. And it's a very confusing situation. It got more confusing today with Derek Mason announced that he is stepping away, not even just from Oklahoma State, but from college football in general for a while here, at least it seems, after just 1 year as the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. I talked about this last week, and I'll just get your opinion on it, Paul. I'm of the mind that with all this going on, the way things have changed, could this be the time that Oklahoma State maybe needs to seriously consider the end of the Mike Gundy era and just fully reset the whole thing?
I think there is definitely, and there always has been within that supporter base and that booster base, a percentage of guys that don't like Mike Gundy, just to be fair, and would not cry at all if he decided to leave, get taken the Tennessee job, or tried to push for Nebraska, who would have said, thank you for your service, come back anytime, but we're gonna move on. And that exists, and that has existed for a very long time. But with the changeover from T. Boone Pickens to a different kind of lead booster group, I think Gundy's position is more secure now than it would have been 4 or 5 years ago. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I know that's kind of weird because the portal didn't exist at that point, but if it had been like this a half decade ago, yeah, I do think that you would have had to really watch out. At this point, I think Gundy's been there for that long, has that much goodwill, really is the sheriff of the whole town, as you see with the way that he treats people sometimes at press conferences and the way that he speaks to people. I don't think that he needs to worry about that. However, if they go 4-8 next year, 2-7 in the Big 12, yeah, to me that would signify to me that it's time to move on, because not just are you losing off the field, you're losing on the field. But they haven't lost on the field in so long, guys. It's hard for me to say they're going to have a huge dip, but it doesn't look promising. They need to go into the portal and they need to hit it hard for the next, couple days, and then go back again in the summer, because they need to rebuild this roster fast. Otherwise, a lot of people are going to pick them bottom 3 in the Big 12 going into next year.
No matter what, I know hopefully we get some news soon out of what's happening down there, because it just feels like something might be in the water. My final 2 questions here for you, Paul, are 2 for the road. First things first, it's what we do as soon as the season ends. We got to have our two early predictions. As it stands right now, I know it's hard to pick. Who do you think's winning the Big 12 next season in college football?
Yeah, my pick is gonna. I hate that I'm gonna do this, guys. I'm saying Texas. I really am gonna say Texas. I hate that I'm doing this, but look, like the talent is so unbelievable. They look so good. I had multiple Big 12 people tell me this year, I can't believe that we beat Texas. Like, I cannot believe we won this game. They're so talented. I think it kind of comes together. The Big 12 guys is so hard to predict, right? We don't even know who people are going to play. We don't know how Cincy is going to step in and compete. So it's hard to peg, are they going to schedule OU and Texas on the road at BYU and at TCU and at these places to give them a little bit of a finger in the eye because they're leaving? But right now, I'll say Texas. I hate that I'm doing it, but I'm going to say UT, maybe with a tiebreaker.
Oh, Paul, hey, man, I'm with you in the idea and the thought process, but also I would hate myself as also if I ended up having to pick Texas to win quite literally anything important at this point. And then my final question for you, Paul, we got all these new teams coming into the Big 12 next year. Who do you think has the best season in the Big 12 conference next year among those 4 new teams?
Yeah, I don't think any of the 4 are going to have like an immediate bump like we saw TCU do when they joined the Big 12 and were incredible. I just don't see that coming. Cincinnati coaching change, UCF not tough enough. For me, I think BYU from a strength and experience perspective is best positioned to win 8 games that first year in the Big 12. So I'll say BYU, but my guess would be that at least those 3 I mentioned are going to be in the 6 to 8 or maybe 9 win range with a bowl game. But I say BYU, they're a tough team, guys. And a bunch of you have seen them already. Kansas State obviously hasn't, but they're a tough team that from a physical perspective, I think matches up pretty well with the Big 12. So I'll say BYU first out of that group, and then Cincinnati, Central Florida right behind.
That's about where I'd be thinking as well. Paul, thank you so much for not just coming on today, Paul, but for the entire college football season. It's a blast every year, and I can't wait till we get to talk to you again next season.
Yeah, guys, what a blast. I enjoy this every single week. Hopefully we can do it again at some point this offseason, but certainly we'll get back into it in, 8 months. What are we going to do?
It is a long offseason, Paul B. No matter what, we'll probably have some big news to break down as the offseason goes along, and if that does, we'll hit you up. Thanks again, Paul. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon.
That is Paul Myerberg for the Big 12 breakdown, our final college football Big 12 breakdown of, for now, this season. But if there's off-season news, we'll bring in our good friend, Paul Myerberg. That'll do it for the noon hour of Mike Deb. It's just me, Fulton Cast, for the rest of the way. Coming in the 1 o'clock hour, who should the Chiefs want to face in the wild card round? Welcome into hour number 2 of Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. Fulton Caster riding solo for the next 2 hours because Jake and I can't seem to find a way to cohesively do our show together anymore. No, Jake is on his way to Joplin, Missouri for some Washburn hoops. That'll be happening later on today on our sister station, Country 106.9, if you want to listen to Jake and the Ichabod. So Jake is on the road, so it'll be just me wrapping things up for these final 2 hours. Maybe next week, Jake and I can have 5 consecutive days of the show being he and I, after I also took a day yesterday, which was nice. I got to take some time off to celebrate my birthday back with my family, and it was very fun. It was an enjoyable time. I got to have cookie cake. It was great. I brought some here to the office. People enjoyed it. Let me tell you, this is my PSA. 1, if you've never had cookie cake, have it. It's a game changer. It changes everything. Secondly, it is superior to actual cake. That is my hot take. That is my opinion. That will never change. Cookie cake, better than actual cake. It is the only thing I ever want to celebrate my accomplishments, which there aren't many. I don't know if there's going to be many in the future. Getting older is apparently one of them. But cookie cake is the superior way to go. It is the best celebratory dessert. Maybe Jake and I'll do a list on that one day. Best celebratory desserts. Can you get real specific at celebratory? I don't know. Who knows? That's the first tangent I'll give you. I'll probably give you other random tangents as we go on today. Want to thank Paul Myerberg for coming on for the final Big 12 football breakdown of the year. We'll chat with Paul possibly over the offseason. We'll see just as some things change and turn, and it's the Big 12. Obviously, nothing exciting is going to happen at all during the season goes. Yeah, something will happen. We might talk to Paul then, but if not, we'll talk to Paul coming up in the next football season. Probably coming up in about August and September. Such a long ways away. But thank Paul not just for coming on today, but for the entire Big 12 breakdown this college football season. One of our favorite interviews every week. It's a great time. So knowledgeable, so enjoyable. It's just a heck of a lot of fun. So thank Paul for coming on. this entire season and getting to chat different things. If I was like Paul and had to pick Texas to win the Big 12, I'd feel dirty doing it as well. But I also don't think he's wrong. They have probably the most talent, but also that talent never means anything. So who knows what will happen in the Big 12 coming up next year. Coming up in this 1 o'clock hour of Mic'd Up, I'm going to look at the Chiefs' potential opponents that they'll face in the divisional round. There's 4 teams they could all end up facing. I have what Jake would rank on the ones he would most like to see to least like to see. I have my own thoughts as well. We will break down that coming up this hour. If everyone loves the list, in honor of me doing some bar trivia on Tuesday night, best games/activities to do in a bar. Not just limited to bar games, bar activities count because what I was doing was a bar activity in bar trivia. But best activities or bar games, Brendan from 580 Sports Talk will join me for that coming up at the 1:20 part of this hour. In the bottom of this hour, Major League Baseball hired a new executive vice president of their media department. That announcement was made today with the idea being that MLB is going to look to create a different way to air their games and go away from the regional sports network packaging system that they have done for Lord knows how long at this point. I'm going to break down what the hire means, will they end up doing it, and kind of the pros and cons of what MLB could do to try and fix their problem with RSNs and regional sports networks, and how, if they did go away with it, that would affect those of us here when it comes to at least the Royals specifically, because that's the team at least some of you would care the most about seeing. We've got a lot coming up today. Coming up, we will also have Jesse Newell is going to join me at the top of the 2 o'clock hour, talk some Chiefs football as Jesse moved to the Chiefs beat on the Kansas City Star. It's fun to talk to Jesse and look at the Chiefs pass rush as well. As always, you can join in on the conversation on the Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429. As I said last time, I'm always more welcome for you guys to hop on even more than normal. It's just me because it gives us more chance to interact, to chat, to do different things. It's great. And of course, as always, you can watch us live on YouTube. Either go to 580wibw.com. We're right there on the front page. Easy way to find the video, and also youtube.com, the Sports on 580 YouTube page. Toss a subscribe if you haven't. Watch the live stream. You can hop into the comments section as well. It's fantastic. It's going to be great. I do want to point out a comment here from our guy Vance on the comments here. Do I think cookie cake's better than ice cream cake? Here's my thing, Vance. First things first, I'm lactose intolerant. So like me and ice cream cakes, we don't jive well. Ice cream cake, I think, is good. It and me do not get along well at all. I can't, like, not even close. We do not get along well at all. But even that being said, yes, cookie cake's better than ice cream cake. Intro was lactose intolerant. There's not a better one. I will hear your opinions. I will hear your arguments. And I will not blame any of you if you think differently than me. But I'm just saying, it's the best celebratory dessert. And then our guy Matt here on the YouTube comments as well for the best bar activity, drink. You're not wrong, Matt. That's a good one. But I don't know if it makes my top 4 because there's more fun things I could do while in the process of drinking at the bar that makes the entire overall experience much better. But we'll get to that coming up, and everyone loves the list today. But to kick off this hour, the Chiefs have 4 potential opponents they could face coming up in the divisional round. They could face the Dolphins, the Ravens, the Chargers, or the Jaguars, because they will face the lowest seeded team when the round begins. For every other playoff system ever to the sport, and this is something I for years, I don't do it anymore, but for years I would forget this football worked. For other sports, it's always, well, it's a bracketed system. So, you just are always going to face one of 2 opponents. Football, I think, does do it right, actually, that just, no, the 1 seed does not face, the winner of the 4-5, because we assume the 2s and the 3s will advance. So then if, one of those gets upset, then technically the 2 or the 3 gets to face a worse opponent than the 1. It's not the NCAA tournament where, the 1 faces the winner of an 8-9, but the 2 could face, a 10, which is technically worse than the 8-9 because you assume the 7 will win. I think football is right of just, no, whatever the lowest seed remaining is after the conclusion of the wild card round, that team goes to face the 1 seed. So that means they could face the 7th seed in Miami if they somehow won, the 6th seed in Baltimore if they somehow won, or more than likely, they'd face the 4 or the 5 in the Chargers or the Jaguars. With all that in mind, Jake and I have been wondering, of those 4 teams, how would you rank it? Who would you most want to see? Who do you least want to see? And Jake and I are pretty much in lockstep of what we want to do, kind of. Jake's team he most wants to see would be of those 4 choices, barring who likely wins or not. Because I think we can all agree the Dolphins under Skylar Thompson probably not going to win. The Ravens under, I mean, not even Tyler Huntley, maybe Anthony Brown, probably not going to win. That out the window. If you had to pick one of those 4 to say, I want that team to win, that's the one I want to face, that's who I would really love to face. Jake is going decently chalked here. The team he most wants to face from the Miami Dolphins. And I can see why. The Dolphins are a mighty fine pick for being the team you'd most want to face. Out of those 4 teams, they're probably the most average to above average defense. The quarterback situation is the least ideal in the fact that you're dealing with, like you as of now deal with Skylar Thompson. He is set to get the start coming up on Sunday for the Dolphins because Tua Tagovailoa has been ruled out. He's still in concussion protocol, has not been cleared for contact activities. And then Teddy Bridgewater is dealing with a finger issue on his throwing hand, so he can't really grip the ball. So it's going to be Skylar Thompson going against Buffalo. And I see the point. If that Miami somehow upset the Bills, you'd be like, all right, cool. You get a face of a third-string quarterback. The running game's a little bit weakened because Raheem Mostert, broke one of his fingers. I believe it's actually his thumb is what he specifically broke. And their defense is kind of eh. I get Jake's point. And that's why Jake's first one he's faced is the Dolphins. For me, I've actually gone back and forth on this. I think when you look at the strengths of the Chiefs' defense and what they have been best at before, their weakness, if they have one, is through the air. The corners can sometimes get burned a little bit. I lean towards maybe the Ravens being the team you'd most want to face. I think I flip-flop with Jake here. And I think I lean to the Ravens being the team I'd most want to face because I think quarterback-wise, you're in a very similar boat. And I don't want to I've made this clear. If Lamar Jackson were to play, this changes everything. But he's probably not going to. And we have to go with what we have right now on the info, which is that he's not going to play. So you're envisioning it without Lamar. Just like you have to view the Dolphins without Tua Tagovailoa. The Ravens with J.K. Dobbins probably back in the fold, yes, they can run the football pretty well. And they're designed to run the football. But you know what the Chiefs have done pretty well most of the season? Defend the run. They can handle most of that. Plus, if you're and I know that the counter to this and the other part to this is the Ravens defense is better. And I agree with that. It is. But I think I trust the Chiefs offense to put up points on whatever defense they face because historically they have done that. So then I go to, all right, if I think the Chiefs offense is going to do fine pretty much no matter what defense they face with one caveat, and I'll get to that. Then it comes down to what offense do I think the Chiefs defense matches up better with? And I actually think their defense might match up better with the Ravens because I trust the Chiefs defensively to defend the run fairly well. And their receivers are bad. Like Demarcus Robinson is wide receiver 1 for the Ravens. Does that worry anyone? Anyone out there? Anyone? Whereas the Dolphins, yes, they have quarterback issues. They do still have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, who guys that I think if you jam them up and throw off timing the ball, it's harder to work with. But they have 2 home run hitters. That if they get the ball and you don't tackle well, they're gone. They get over the top of you, they're gone. You don't have that problem with Baltimore. So that's why Jake thinks the Dolphins are his number 1 team he most want the Chiefs to face. The Ravens are mine. And Jake and I have this flip-flop. Jake's second team he'd like to face would be Baltimore for similar reasons to that I have outlined, mainly the quarterback situation and some of the offensive situations. The defense being better is kind of Jake's little breaking point there. And for me, the flip-flop there for Miami comes down to Miami has receivers I'm more worried about, and that's where the Chiefs have got beat this year through the air. Plus, if you think the Chiefs are going to build a big lead, passing is what you're mainly going to have to deal with. So which team, in my opinion, do you match up better with your pass defense? That's why on Baltimore over Miami. I think you're splitting hairs at that point. I also think, though, those are the teams you're two most likely not to face are Baltimore and Miami because of their quarterback situations. I assume Buffalo and Cincinnati will get the job done, and they'll go out in the 2-3. So then I think we go into the real important part, which comes down to the 4-5 matchup in Jacksonville coming up on Saturday. Anyway, the Saturday night game at 7:15 kickoff from TIAA Field in Jacksonville. Chargers or Jags? Which team do you want to face? And this is where, in one of those rare moments where Jake and I are complete lockstep. We both would rather face the Jags over the Chargers. Yeah, it's, I think, pretty simple when you also look at just the Chiefs have played those two teams this year. They played the Chargers twice, the Jaguars once. That Jags game was pretty low stress. The Jags tried to move the ball a little bit. They tried to get creative, but overall, the Chiefs never really had an issue winning that football game. Whereas playing the Chargers, it was 2 3-point wins that required a lot of great game-saving plays. If you're a Chiefs fan, you need to be rooting for Jacksonville all the way coming up on Saturday night. Because Jacksonville and the Chargers, I think, can both put up points at a very similar level. I don't know which one to give the edge to. Fully healthy, I probably give the edge to the Chargers because I think their offensive weaponry around their great quarterback is better than the Jaguars, but I think it is overall fairly close. Defensively, I think the Chargers are a bit better, but also comes down to familiarity. Beating a team 3 times in a year, very hard. That's what you would have to do if you faced the Chargers in the playoffs. And then it's just this, and we've talked about this at length. The Chargers just seem to match up well with the Chiefs. They find a way to match up well. Brandon Staley has found a way to confound the Chiefs offense and make it difficult. Justin Herbert has found a way to put up points on the Chiefs defense. Those games historically are very tough. You add into the fact that Joey Bosa might be back in the divisional round. He's trending towards, being healthier. Rashawn Slater's practice window, the star young left tackle for the Chargers, his 21-day window to turn from IR was activated this week. He's probably going to play in the divisional round. He could play. He's probably going to play in the wild card round, pardon me. He could play in that divisional round. That makes it more difficult to generate a good pass rush. The Chargers just are a team historically that match up very well against Kansas City, which makes them the team you least want to face. Because they match up well. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in a year, and especially when those 2 wins you have over them this year are by a combined 6 points. Plus, the Chargers are playing really good football right now. They're finding themselves a bit of a groove. They're getting healthy a little bit here. They're the number 1 team that if you have to face LA coming up next week, you're worried. If there is a worry and the most difficult route to winning a Lombardi and winning the Super Bowl this year would be if you had to start your matchup in the divisional round dealing with the Chargers. You get that benefit of playing, off the bye at home. It's helpful. The Chargers are just the only team. And I'll be honest, the Chargers are the only team that the Chiefs can face in the divisional round that might give me pause to where things don't go perfectly and don't go pretty well, that they could slip up. Jaguars, I wouldn't be worried. Dolphins and Ravens, definitely not worried. But that Chargers-Jaguars matchup coming up on Saturday night, it's going to be big and it's going to matter with who the Chiefs play. I will bring this up from the Bigger Tires text line from the 785. Andy Reid off a bye. Give me anybody. Not scared. Love the mentality, and that's a good one to put. Like we said, Andy Reid is 27-4 coming off the bye week. He's tremendous. He is great. At that same token, the Chargers are the only ones where you would take a pause because they play the Chiefs tight. They play them well, and beating a team 3 times in a year, very difficult. We'll see how it goes going forward, but no matter what, the divisional round could be stressful, could also be stress-free. We're going to take a time out here on Mic'd Up. Coming up next, time for Everyone Loves a List. Time for Everyone Loves the List here on Mic'd Up. And since I don't have Jake with me for the list today, I bring in my good friend Brendan Dorzinski from 580 Sports Talk. Brendan, thank you so much for hopping in for the list today.
Happy to be here.
Brendan, our list today. Bar games / bar activities. This doesn't have to be a traditional game concept, but just things you can do at a bar outside of drinking, though we had someone on the YouTube comments who said the best activity, just drink.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably feel that way.
I think they very much might. Brendan, what is your number 4 for today's list?
My number 4 bar activity is ignoring the sports opinions of the guy sitting next to you. Oh, that's interesting. You think Patrick Mahomes is too much of a hot dog and should hand it off more? That's really interesting. Great. Don't talk to me anymore.
I feel like this might be a personal experience you've had.
I've been there a time or two. If I wanted to know what you thought about the NBA, I would ask you what you thought about the NBA.
I luckily have never been in this position, but that definitely does not sound fun. Number 4 for me in a more traditional game aspect. Give me the tabletop shuffleboard.
All right.
Very
fun.
Good one. I think it's a very fun one.
I don't think I've ever actually played shuffleboard.
I think I've done like twice.
I think I did once.
Done it a couple times. It's entertaining. It's not high up there, but it's fairly entertaining.
Number 3 for me, another classic one. Big darts fan. We're going to go with the dart, which says a lot that it's number 3. I think my top 2 are pretty powerful, pretty strong options, but love darts.
I am right there lockstep with you. My number 3 is also darts. Darts is very fun.
Do you watch darts on TV ever?
Every once in a while, if I'm honestly kind of bored and just need to find something to throw on, I will. Exciting. Exhilarating.
Incredible 9-legger in the PDC competition last week.
I did see that. It's just great content. Darts, extremely great activity. Your number 2?
Number 2 for me is singing along with the touch tunes. I don't drink. I've made that clear over time. I don't drink, but I like to go out, have a good time, like to, play games, hang out with friends, sing along, whatever. You put a couple bangers on the touch tunes on the jukebox. I'm going to sing along. It can really be anything. Ride With Me by Nelly. That's my all-time go-to. Once, it was the weekend I graduated from KU, actually. Shout out to Louisa's downtown. A few buddies and I played the Star Spangled Banner.
That's awesome.
I played the national anthem. We stood there, hand over heart, sang along to the whole thing. Getting the whole group to sing along to the touch tunes, that's up there.
That's a good choice. Honorable mention for me. Number 2 for me, very simple one. It's pool. Pool at a bar is fun. It's a good time.
That's my number 1. I'm a big pool guy. I love pool. I'm not good. In fact, I'm very bad, but I love playing pool. That's the number one thing going to a bar.
That's fair.
I usually go just to play pool.
You and I have gone to a few times, and that's the normal thing we're doing. It's a good time. Number one for me, though, is very simple. It's bar trivia, because I love trivia in and of itself. But if you tell me we're going to a bar and there's trivia, I will make us play.
How'd you do the other night?
We got third place.
That's pretty good.
We did good.
Was it out of 3?
It's out of like 15, 17, something like that. I'm there for sports and sports only, but I contribute, and I contribute well. Brendan, thanks for joining me for Wellness List.
Absolutely.
We'll take a timeout. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at the MLB Regional Network decisions. Welcome back into Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. I want to thank Brendan for coming on, helping me with Everyone Loves a List today with Jake out. If you have any thoughts on our list today, best bar games or bar activities, you can chime in on the Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429, or in the comments of our YouTube live stream. You can two ways to view the live stream. Easiest way is to go to our website, 580wibw.com. We're right there on the front page. You can click it, join the video, watch it there, or youtube.com. Go to our YouTube page, Sports on 580. Drop a subscribe while you're there. Watch the video as well. You can jump in on the live comments section of the live stream as well. Our guy Vance with a very good point regarding one of Brendan and I's favorite activities of darts. It always surprised me that missiles with sharp, pointy tips were allowed in the hands of very drunk people. That's the danger part of darts in a bar. However, I have learned over the years that normally those that are commandeering the darts at a bar are either the soberest people there, or while drunk still have good control. I have never seen a reckless person with darts at a bar, though I'm sure it has happened many a time. Personal experience has never happened, but you never know. But if you have a thought, jump in on the Big O Tires text line or the YouTube comments. Just two different ways to get involved in the conversation today. Remember, coming up next hour, our good friend Jesse Newell of the Kansas City Star will join me to chat a little bit of Chiefs football and take a look at that as well. We'll also look at the Chiefs improving pass rush, particularly the way that George Karlaftis has really started to perform and turn things around his rookie year. But we're going to begin this little back half of the 1 o'clock hour. Major League Baseball made a very interesting move today. They announced the hiring of Billy Chambers, the former Fox Sports Net executive, as the new position of Executive Vice President of Local Media It's a new position that MLB has now created that Billy Chambers will now be the head of, with the idea that MLB knows that they need to take a more direct handling in the distribution of their games. The current model that I'm sure most of you know, for those of you that don't, the current model is the licensing rights to majority of MLB games and for teams is handed out with regional sports networks. For us here in the Kansas City area, that's Bally Sports Kansas City or Bally Sports in general. Bally Sports also oversees a bunch of other different networks and different regional networks around the country. The Bally's is the Royals regional sports network provider. They have the licensing and distribution rights to the Royals specifically in this market. There's a bunch of others for different ones. I think Marquee has their deal for the Cubs, and the Marquee network has some stuff. I know that there's different things going on in the Northeast with the Yankees, and the Red Sox have their own things going on. I think a subset of AT&T has something and stuff in the Pacific Northwest. I will openly admit I'm not very up to date on a lot of the regional sports networks outside of this local area, but there's a bunch of them. And that's the way that baseball's always done things, which is also part of the blackout problem of why in local areas there's always blackouts if you aren't watching through the regional sports provider, network provider, because they have those rights and they black out to force you to use their service. It's complicated, it's annoying, and it's one of the biggest hindrances to the overall marketability of baseball, and a large symptom to the regionalism of the sport is it is hard to watch the game. We talked about it at length, this past Royal season when Bally Sports took over for Fox Sports, when that sale and change and yada, yada, yada happened. Bally couldn't strike a deal. Sinclair, their parent company, could not strike a deal with a lot of different, providers that used to carry Bally. At the time was Fox Sports Kansas City. UTTV is the one most notable that I can think of because it's what I had and couldn't use. I had Fox Sports Kansas City when it was there. When it switched to Bally, that went away. Didn't exist anymore. It was very niche at who had Bally Sports Kansas City, which eventually led to the launch of Bally Plus or Bally Sports Plus or whatever the hell they did, where they charge you $20 a month to watch their terrible product. Well, this hiring of Billy Chambers seems to scream the idea that Major League Baseball wants to do away with the regionalism in the regional sports network system and move some more things out. It's the clearest sign they're going to try and take a more active role in the distributions of games with other thoughts. John O'Rand here, the Sports Business Journal, points out in his piece that says, quote, "This hire is the clearest sign that MLB has decided that it needs to take a more active role in producing and distributing its games." One of the biggest things that came out of this piece from John O'Rand of the Sports Business Journal is that one idea that's been considered, this is for O'Rand's piece, that is MLB producing and distributing games directly for distribution companies like Xfinity, DirecTV, and Dish Network, while at the same time launching a direct-to-consumer service that would combine the out-of-market package with local telecasts like their extra innings and MLB.TV out-of-market packages. What all this means, in the simplest terms, to take away from sometimes the over complexity that business contractual negotiations become, MLB is looking for a way to make their product more accessible. It seems like what this move is signaling is that that's what they want to do, which has been one of my biggest things for a while when I discuss, because Jake's always talked about how baseball's a regional sport now, and I don't necessarily disagree with him on that, and that you're losing the casual fan, and Jake thinks that's gone for forever. I don't think it's gone for forever. I think there's a way to get your marketability back and to retake a place in the American sports conscious. You're never going to surpass football, but there's a gap. There's a spot and a place at number 2 that I think can be achieved. There is a spot, and more importantly, there's a moment of time in the yearly sports calendar where all you have is baseball, really. And yet they don't take advantage of that for numerous reasons. It's not just the difficulty with watching the games, but I think that's one of the top ones, is it's so hard to find a game. We have a texter in who makes a good point from the Big Tires text line from the 785 that says, "I have Dish and they carried Ballad for years." That's true. My father has Dish Network. That's the way, I'll admit this, that's the way I watch a lot of cable channels, is I just borrow my dad's Dish Network login. It's great. Very good benefit at this point. I'm going to be sad whenever that might stop. I can't watch the Royals that way because we don't have Bally's. That's a problem. It is a problem when you are in the market. When you're in the market for a team and you can't watch them because it's so difficult to find the game. I think that's right up there with one of their biggest issues. And this hiring seems to signal that they're going to try and fix it. Whether they actually do it and it actually comes to fruition will be difficult. It begins with the dissolving of the current RSN contracts and the contracts of different regional sports networks. Now, a lot of those companies that have all these regional sports network deals are dealing with different bits of financial trouble. So those contracts might end sooner rather than later as they try to consolidate and change different things. Especially if MLB says, we're going to pay you a big chunk of money to get out of the contract and let us do our own thing. So eventually MLB might make this change and start really directly producing and distributing their own content, which could make the games more accessible. But I think beyond knowing that MLB is looking to end the regional sports network model, which I think they need to do, I think it also then begs the question, what should they do instead? Because Jake and I were chatting about this off the air a little bit, and we'll get more of his thoughts coming up tomorrow as well. Jake believes you still need to have it over the air. You need an ability for, the average Joe, the average consumer to flip through their TV channels on their cable network provider and find the game. You can't make it streaming exclusive. And to him, I do agree. Your in-market games need to be available over the airwaves as of now. Now, whether that's MLB kind of creating their own network that airs it, whether that's MLB makes MLB Network more available and just changes, based on your region, you get X game depending on your market, much like, for football, CBS has a specific game in market. Fox has an in-market game. The Chiefs usually one of those in this area. And then as soon as there's the nationally televised game on, Fox's America's Game of the Week or whatever, there's a nationally one. Baseball can work a similar package. What network they work with becomes the question. They do already have their deals with Fox and ESPN that I think using one of those channels to just be like, hey, in X time slot, we want to air this game every single time it's on. Where baseball runs into more of a difficulty, especially with some of those big networks airing it that way instead of the regional system, is that's a time slot every single day. That's the problem. And I wonder what's going to be done there because, you can try and work with ESPN to air some things. They're not going to, if their ideas, they take over some of the regionalism part of it and airing, just your market's game every day. ESPN is not going to want to at 7:00 on a Wednesday night always have an ability to air the Royals. Now, there's other ESPN family networks they could do it on. Who knows? But that's the problem. And then it's extra from the Retired Text Line brings up a good point from the 402. What are you going to do when you have your own networks for your time? People like the Cubs, the Dodgers, the Yankees, who are very tied into kind of their own networks. That comes down to what the league wants to do in modifying the regional sports network contracts. If the Cubs, the Yankees, Dodgers get paid handsomely enough, it's changed up. I don't know intimately enough of those contract situations and what they're going to do, but that's also a question. The thing for me, and really once again boils down to this: you need to have the ability to have it over the cable airwaves whenever it's on. And when the Royals play at 7:10 on a Tuesday night, a cable channel in your area, in the Royals market area, there needs to be a cable channel on nearly every cable provider that plays the game, like Fox Sports Kansas City was. That was on damn near everything, and you could turn on the game. Bally screwed that over. But finding that dance partner is the hard part. Now, MLB does have MLB Network, which they can essentially use that way because they do air regional casts about once a week during the season. There's a game on MLB Network that, depending on your region, is what you get. Usually it's one of two games. But that opens the avenue. MLB creating their own kind of in-house channel network system could work. MLB expanding their out-of-market extra inning system, which is kind of their Sunday ticket, could work. But you need to make it simpler to access. The easier part to me is making it more accessible for streaming is just eliminating blackouts. It's just if you can eliminate blackouts and you want to stream the game either through their MLB at Bat app system, like I have MLB at Bat, lets me watch whatever game I want out of market all the time. Great service for a baseball nut like me. Change that to where, I could put the Royals on through that would help. I floated around the idea of, you have deals with ESPN already. The NHL has moved to a system to where you can watch all their regional networks through ESPN Plus, and they're at least available through that system. Works, though they still have blackout restrictions. Those are different ideas. I think there needs to be a balance between over-the-air and streaming. I think you need both options because, I know everyone complains about games over streaming. We know, the opinions in this area over ESPN Plus. We understand that. The world is entertainment, though, is moving to streaming. It just is. Traditional cable TV, as it stands at some point, probably won't really exist in its purest form at some point. Advancing into the 21st century is what baseball needs to do. And this is the clearest indicator that maybe they understand that finally. I don't know when they'll make a change. I would not think it's going to be for quite a while. But it is delightful to see that they're going to try. That it looks like they're going to try and do something. But I don't know what it is. I'm going to hold out hope, but I've never really trusted, what Manfred's done. He's rarely ever done anything good for the game. And a text from the 785 is fully with me. From the 785, they say, I've given up on MLB doing the reasonable, practical, helpful thing to their fans and their product. It's just like me and Gino said, $signs. You're right. I've always said Manfred doesn't do what's best for the game. He does what's just best for the bottom line. He doesn't want to do I've always said it with the things of pace of play and all that. It's like, none of it's for the good of the game. Some of it is. Most of it really isn't. It's just about, catering to the biggest money makers. And I'm not always for that, but it's also business. But this might be the clearest sign that at least MLB understands they have a problem and they need to fix that problem going forward. I don't know what their end result's going to be. I don't know when it's going to come out, but this is a signal, the biggest signal we've had yet, that MLB understands they need to fix their regional sports network models, that they need to make their game more accessible if they want to get back into the hearts and minds of the casual fan. And you know what? They might fail at it, but looks like they're at least going to try. We're going to take one more final time out here on Mic'd Up for this hour. When we come back, Derek Carr officially not going to be a Raider anymore. Where's he going to end up? We'll get some early thoughts on that coming up next. We knew it was coming, but Derek Carr officially today posted a goodbye and thank you to Raiders fans on his Twitter account. Now, Derek Carr's not been moved anywhere. He has not been traded, not been cut. But he officially said goodbye to Raiders fan today, confirming what we all essentially knew. This also per Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. Says sources, the Raiders begin the process of evaluating the trade market for quarterback Derek Carr as they prepare for a decision on their quarterback for the future. This points to the possibility of Carr holds no trade clause and will be part of the process, leaving the organization. The Raiders benching Carr signaled this. Derek Carr's new extension that cost them the most money begins to guarantee on February 15th, a month and 3 days away. If he is on the Raiders at that point, his salary for 2023 of $32.9 million and $7.5 million of his 2024 salary fully guarantees, and the Raiders are on the hook for that if he is still on the team come the 15th of February. Carr holds a full no trade clause. He gets decided where he wants to go. But with this signal, Carr is either going to be traded or cut by February 15th. I don't know what the Raiders are going to do, but no matter what, Carr's going to find a home. And with that full no trade clause, he controls a lot where he's going to go. If he gets traded, he's going to tell them where he ends up. And if he's cut, then he can just drive that price up as much as he wants. And it will cost the Raiders pretty much nothing as they try and reset their quarterback situation. I still think the Jets are where I think Carr should go. I think if he wants to be a winner, and he discussed it in his goodbye letter, goodbye tweet message to Raiders fans, he wants to still fight someone for a championship. You drop that man on the Jets, they might win 10, 11 games a year. I don't know where it'll be, but Derek Carr, more likely than not going to win the silver and black next season. We're going to take a timeout. That does it for the 1 o'clock hour. Coming up on the 2 o'clock hour, Jesse Newell joining me to chat all things Chiefs football. It's time for the final hour of Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. Fulton Caster here with you, riding solo to wrap up today's show with Jake Heads all the way down to Joplin, Missouri. for some Washburn hoops action as the Cowboys will take on Missouri Southern. Last time Jake and I were in Joplin, it was cold, it was freezing, and our gear didn't work. So I, instead of doing sideline duties that day, just sat around in the cold doing basically nothing. Overall, though, still a fun game. Interesting time to watch it as well. But that's what Jake's drinking here. Jake's call of the Washburn game between Missouri Southern coming up on our sister station, Country 1069. Coming up here in this 2 o'clock hour, we're going to take a look at the Chiefs pass rush and how they're doing. And, of course, how this Chiefs team has been improving. Also get some thoughts on college hoops as well. But to begin this 2 o'clock hour of the show, we're bringing in our good friend Jesse Newell of the Kansas City Star, formerly of the KU beat when we talk to Jesse every week. But Jesse moved on to the Kansas City Chiefs beat, is now the Chiefs beat reporter for the Kansas City Star, doing fantastic work. As always, I recommend reading every bit of Jesse's great work in the Kansas City Star. And you can follow Jesse on Twitter at Jesse Newell. Jesse, it has been a while since we've talked, my man. How have you been covering this, what's been a fairly entertaining football season for the Chiefs?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been. And, Patrick Mahomes has been Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid has been Andy Reid. And I took a little bit of the sting off of not covering KU football being good for the first time in whatever it was, 13 years. So, 14-3 for the Chiefs, and obviously Super Bowl aspirations as they should after this regular season, and we'll see how far they can go now.
I do have to say, Jesse, for your old beat, I think it's slightly unfair for KU football to have decided to finally become good again the moment you leave them. After all that you were suffered through all those years, I think they should have been nice enough to let you have themselves be good and go back to a bowl while you were still on the beat. But Chiefs potentially making a Super Bowl run, a decent consolation prize after all that KU football, but still kind of rude of them to get good the moment you left.
Well, I think that maybe they would see it the other way, which is I left and then they got good. So maybe the real issue was I was hanging around the program. So I don't know. You could go either way, but somehow I haven't put X on the Chiefs. Maybe they're unhexable.
You know what? Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, maybe they just are. We'll start with that Chiefs offense here, Jesse. All offseason was, no Tyreek Hill. Things will change. The Chiefs will slow down. People were picking the Chiefs to finish last in the AFC West. People were saying they were going to miss the playoffs. They might even be 500. Yet here we are, the Chiefs offense, the best it's ever been, even almost some metrics better than that 2018 year and Mahomes' first year as the starter with Hill, with Kelsey and all that. Mahomes might win MVP. He's the odds-on favorite at most places. The Chiefs won the AFC West yet again, an easy stride. Given all the off-season noise that was there surrounding this team, did it surprise you at all with just, not that the Chiefs silenced the quote-unquote haters, but how thoroughly they outdid expectations at a time when everyone thought they'd finally take a step back, and all they did was have maybe their best season of the Mahomes era?
Yeah, I was one of those people. You think about Tyreek Hill that, okay, you're hoping to be 85 to 90% of the offense you were. And if you're that, then you're going to be a really good football team. You're going to be in the playoff hunt. You're going to be in the contention for an AFC West championship. And you're going to give yourself a chance at the Super Bowl again. And obviously, it went a different way. I think the hope this offseason was basically you take what was on Tyreek's plate and you put it on Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid's plate. And you basically say, Andy Reid has figured out these problems before. He can figure them out again. You give him different pieces he has to work with, and he can maneuver them, put them in different spots, and maximize their skill sets. And then with Patrick Mahomes, I think last year, and rightfully so, it was sort of either Kelsey or Tyreek. And he even has admitted to us this year that there were times where he would kind of laser focus on those two guys, where you'd say, okay, Tyreek's in a one-on-one matchup. I'm going to him no matter what the coverage is. And this year really forced him to reevaluate his game and then change his game to say, no, that's not going to be the way it goes anymore. I'm not going to laser focus on somebody. I'm going to make and go through my progressions and throw to the open guy. And so it has been fascinating to see kind of how he's changed. You go back to the AFC Championship game last year, and the guy just had happy feet. He had the worst half of his career in that game, was just all shifty in the pocket, even with the three-man rush. And you saw him always try to kind of scramble and make plays. Well, this year, he's just been really patient in the pocket, and he hasn't. He's gotten his footwork better. He's been comfortable making throws out of the pocket and getting the ball to his hands and taking, check downs at 6, 7, 8 yards and continue moving the football. So, yeah, it's been really impressive. I think best case scenario, probably the Chiefs thought before the year started was you get 85 to 90% of your offense without Tyreek. Patrick makes some gains in some categories. Andy Reid covers up some other deficiencies, and you hope that with all the resources you get and you put on the defense, that the defense can improve, and all of a sudden you're about the same level of team as you were last year. And instead, Patrick Mahomes has probably gotten better. Andy Reid, took the challenge and got better, and the Chiefs' offense as a whole has probably been better than last year. So you add that to a defense that's now improving with a bunch of rookies. You get your salary cap more reset and in order without the two big salaries on the books, and all of a sudden you got the Chiefs not only at 14-3 this year, but about as good or bright as a future as any of the 32 teams out there in the NFL. So it's a great place for Chiefs fans to be at, because not only do you have a chance to win the whole thing this year, you've got a great chance every year the next 5 as well.
I'm right there with you, Jesse. And when you talk about this Chiefs offense, the way they performed, it kind of, for me at least, you got to start and you got to stop with Mahomes and Reid. And I love that you mentioned the evolution Mahomes has made this year of, going through maybe Reid's a bit more, being more comfortable in the pocket, not being so dialed in on one or two guys. Is that the biggest jump you think Mahomes has made, which has truly led him to a second MVP caliber season? Is it as simple as just he's gotten more comfortable going through progressions and multiple reads, or is there something else you think at play that's led Mahomes just have this such amazing season when, yes, he still has one Hall of Fame target and Travis Kelce, the guy I believe to be the best tight end in football, maybe the best tight end to ever play the game. But then you look at his receiver core, that's kind of just a bunch of guys who have performed well, but they're not superstars. Is it as simple as just Mahomes has gotten comfortable using more weapons, or is there something else you think has led to him taking this next step and having an MVP caliber season with maybe less weapons than he's ever had before?
Yeah, I think this offseason sort of caused a lot of the Chiefs to reevaluate, and to figure out how they could get better. And I think that Andy Reid was one of those, and obviously Patrick Mahomes was one of those. But I do think sometimes the right play is the easy play. And we know what Mahomes has been good at throughout the course of his career. He makes these crazy plays. He runs around the pocket, outside the pocket, does things, throws across his body, does these things that basically no other quarterback does. And he's had those sorts of highlights this year too. He's had the throw to McKinnon against the Bucs that he's getting hit by one end and throws in the end zone, kind of just shot puts it there. He has the throw to McKinnon against Denver where he kind of no looks and flips it to the side and gets it. So it's not like those plays haven't existed, but you don't see as many of the bombs anymore. You don't see the Chiefs always going for the big chunk play. It's more just like reading things pre-snap, understanding what's happening, being helped by pre-snap motion to kind of read whether it's man or zone coverage, and then getting the ball in your hand. And I just think Mahomes is a guy that is wired every week to try to look at what happened the previous week and get a little bit better and get better with what he does. I mean, perfect example is that at Denver game where he threw 3 interceptions, and he went back to the film and said, hey, I looked and there were a lot of easy throws. I tried to make tough throws, and there were easy throws there for 7 or 8 yards. Why make the tough throws? Take the layup. And the very next week, he sets an NFL record for completion percentage against the Houston Texans by just carving them up by looking at the zone, seeing what's available, and taking easy yardage. So I just think that's him right now. You know what I mean? Like, he already is the best player in the NFL, and yet week to week, game to game, season to season, he's always looking and saying, okay, my footwork wasn't good there. I need to improve that this week. And he has the base around him, whether that's Matt Nagy, the quarterback's coach back with him, or Andy Reid, who is obviously an offensive guru, one of the greatest offensive minds in NFL history, to get him back on track when he's a little bit off or when he's a little bit wavering. So that's what's created the Chiefs offense again. I don't think that there's been the big chunk explosive plays, the flashy type plays. The flashy plays this year of Mahomes doing something you've never seen before with kind of interesting ad-lib plays, but it's maybe not the ones compared to a season ago or 2 seasons ago where he really was maybe trying to force those plays. These come kind of more naturally. So I think it's really big credit to him, and I think it's sort of the right mindset to have, which is as good as you are, you can always be better. And so whether it's footwork, patience in the pocket, going week to week and seeing what you can do better, finding guys and letting them make plays. The Chiefs have a lot of yards after catch, so a lot of this is not Mahomes airing this thing out. It's him getting it to playmakers and letting them make plays. I think a lot of that credit goes to Patrick Mahomes because he just seems to continually motivated to be the best he can be. And throughout the course of the season, that's exactly what he's done. He's just steadily improved every single week.
It is definitely a joy to watch the way Mahomes has progressed, Jesse. It's been fantastic. There's a lot of different weapons and different ways we can look at how this offense has played so well beyond Mahomes here. But I want to look at two what I would almost call out of nowhere weapons that have progressed in particular for the Chiefs this year. We'll start with Jerick McKinnon, who, and my math could be wrong, I think he's caught like 300 touchdown passes, it seems like, in the past month or so. He's gone on this streak of just being this outlet out of the backfield and being such a good receiving running back for the Chiefs here, especially as of late. Has now set the NFL record for most consecutive games with a touchdown reception by a running back. Just how have you seen this emergence of McKinnon over the past month and a half of the year? And what do you think kind of has led to this emergence of McKinnon? It's just as simple as, he's been on the field more and therefore being found, or has he taken some kind of a step within this Andy Reid offense to really make him what's kind of been kind of this unknown weapon for this offense that's unlocked a different piece?
Yeah, well, first off, you have to give credit to McKinnon. I mean, at age 30, this is not where most running backs are, and he keeps in really good shape. He obviously is a great asset in the pass blocking game. That's why from the beginning of the season he was Chiefs' third down back, and he has good hands, dude, a really good weapon out of the backfield. But I mean, if I'm just being completely honest with you, this is how you trade Tyreek Hill and still remain really good and go 14-3 and get your salary cap in check and have a great future potentially, is that you sign a guy like McKinnon for $1 million in free agency. And I talk about accentuating the positives. I mean, Andy Reid just schemes the heck up on Jerick McKinnon, especially when it comes to the red zone. There was a play a couple weeks ago where they ran a couple pick routes for him in the red zone, like Travis Kelce, who everybody's looking to in the red zone. All the defenders are focused on him. He comes in, he rubs, and he picks Jerick McKinnon's man, so he's wide open in the end zone. And so, I mean, Jerick McKinnon gets credit for the catch, but it's also like Andy Reid knowing he has a guy who can run a route in Jerick McKinnon, who has really good hands, and knowing the attention is going to be on Travis Kelce, and using that to get Jerick McKinnon the football in open space and scheme up a wide open touchdown. So this is how you do it, right? I mean, we can all talk, there's off season where everyone's like, oh, the Chiefs, it would be great to have them have Saquon Barkley or, whatever running back you want to name that would cost them a lot of resources, a lot of money. Or you could just have Andy Reid take this $1 million guy who was available to anybody out there and have him tie the NFL record for receiving touchdowns in a season by a running back, because he's able to use his skill set and play up to what he does well. And then it's funny because once Jerick McKinnon has started scoring these touchdowns, what have the Chiefs done? Well, then they put like Kadarius Toney in the backfield with him and run a play, and all of a sudden Jerick McKinnon's a complete blocker for him. So they're using Jerick McKinnon as a decoy. Like, oh, you think they're going to throw it to him? Oh, now you're running it. The receiver in the backfield, and Jerick McKinnon is the guy blocking for him. So I think this goes back to the offensive coaching staff. And again, just the ability, it's almost seems like the Dodgers in baseball. Like the Dodgers just keep churning out all these really good players, all these good prospects. And you do give credit to the player. It is part of the player. But at some point when it's just this overflow of talent, you're like, the Dodgers are really doing something right with their system. And I think that's where you have to be with the Chiefs, which is Jerick McKinnon was available to 31 other teams out there in the offseason at the beginning of the summer. He signs with the Chiefs. Andy Reid knows how to utilize him in the best way possible. And all of a sudden, toward the end of the year, he becomes the AFC Offensive Player of the Month, which, again, in a perfect world, all the people out there that maybe wanted the Chiefs to get a Saquon Barkley type, if you would have said that guy would have been a AFC Player of the Month, Offensive Player of the Month for the Chiefs for 1 month of the season, you would have been happy with that. Instead, it comes from Jerick McKinnon, a guy who's making $1 million. So that's what the Chiefs are right now. I mean, you look at what they did. They trade Tyreek Hill. All of a sudden, they bring in George Karlaftis. He's emerging with sacks. You've got Brian Cook, who now is getting more comfortable in there. Leo Chanel is getting more snaps back there. Jalen Watson is doing great as a third cornerback, and now as a 7th-round pick. Trent McDuffie's coming to his own as a first-round pick. I mean, you just see all these guys starting to emerge, and, it seems all of a sudden like everything's kind of coming together for the Chiefs at the right time, and that's just part of the system that they are churning with. That seems to be a really effective thing right now that the Chiefs have built up, all of that around Patrick Mahomes. So, again, McKinnon gets credit, and you talk to the coaches, Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator, Andy Reid, they all give him a lot of credit for his leadership and kind of helping to mentor Isaiah Pacheco in that room. But, I got to be honest, for him to be an AFC Offensive Player of the Month, I think a lot of that credit goes to the coaching staff and Andy Reid. They've been able to get the most out of him, and more than any other team in the NFL. I'm really confident about that.
Yeah, giving credit to the coaching staff is important. It's just been all some great things here. You speak of some of those acquisitions, some of the things the Chiefs have done, to try and replace what they've done offensively and change with a lot of young, more cheaper players. One of the big moves this midseason was when Brett Veach traded and acquired Kadarius Toney from the Giants. And when that trade came, Jake and myself basically said, he's probably not going to do much this year. It's hard to learn an Andy Reid offense. This is a next year move. Well, then all of a sudden, as of late, Kadarius Toney, since he's been healthy, has started to really, really establish himself with some different roles in this Chiefs offense. Just what have you seen out of Kadarius Toney since he's been here for Kansas City? And how important of a factor do you think he is, not even going forward into the next few years, just how important of a factor do you think Toney is to this offense for this playoff run?
Yeah, I wrote about him last game. Obviously, he opened some eyes with some of the moves he made. Patrick Mahomes said after the game when we were down there in Vegas, basically said horizontally what he does, the shiftiness is unlike any player he's ever played with before. And you saw that on a couple of the juke moves. You've seen on some of the touchdowns he's scored this season. I still think, to your previous point, I still think that's somewhat of a factor is that he came in midseason. They are trying to get him caught up with the playbook, but it is midseason, so it's tough to do that. He had 18 snaps in this past game, and so that's probably what he is for the Chiefs right now. I think you teach him certain plays, you get him very comfortable with those plays. But we broke this film down. I did as part of a story this week for the Kansas City Star, and one of his runs in the red zone that Kadarius Toney had, you can go back. Andy Reid ran the same play in 2016 with a rookie named Tyreek Hill, and so once again, this is what you talk about with the Chiefs. You trade Tyreek Hill, you get all these draft picks, you clear up cap room. And then you buy low on a guy like Kadarius Toney, who now is running the 25 to 30% of those gadget plays that Tyreek Hill used to run. So you sort of have filled in for part of that production very cheaply while getting rid of the main asset and bringing in resources back. I mean, this is how you build a long-term winner. This is how you're able to sustain this thing year after year after year. So I actually asked Kadarius Toney in the locker room, I said, what can people expect from you in the playoffs? He kind of laughed and said, a lot like what was out there today. So he had the 3 carries, he had the 2 catches, he had that all in 18 snaps. So when he's on the field, the Chiefs are most likely going to utilize him in most of those snaps. And so I do think he sort of has that gadget role. And the other part to put with this is, I don't want to say the Chiefs are bulletproof. Again, no team is unbeatable in any game in the NFL. It's sports. That's why we watch. We don't know, nothing can be fully guaranteed. But part of the reason that him only playing 18 to 20 snaps is okay is because the Chiefs are much more multifaceted this year with what they can do. They play more tight ends than they did a year ago. They can go under center. They can get some of that run game going. And last week, without McCole Hardman and Sky Moore, they basically only had 4 receivers, and they basically just put out there more tight ends more of the time, and then had Kadarius Toney run his gadget plays and made up for it with all that stuff. So I think the Chiefs have different options. McCole Hardman's back, Sky Moore's back. You can go to different receiver sets with that. You can go under center. You can put tight ends out there. They got Blake Bell. They've got, Noah Gray has emerged. Travis Kelce, obviously. They've got a lot of 13 personnel, which is 1 running back and 3 tight ends. Gotten that in there. So I think they have a lot of different ways they can go. And because of that, you don't need Kadarius Toney to take on a huge load this year. You just need him to be the sort of the playmaker that he has been. And so Andy Reid giving him some Tyreek Hill plays from 7 years ago, I think that's a good indication of what they like about him and potentially the type of playmaking ability he has. So I would expect, as Kadarius told me in the locker room, I'd expect him to have the same sort of role moving forward, and that could be a game changer on any given play for the Chiefs as they head into the playoffs.
Jesse Newell is our guest, the Chiefs beat reporter for the Kansas City Star. Does just fantastic work in the Star covering the Kansas City Chiefs. You can follow Jesse on Twitter at Jesse Newell. All right, going to the defensive side of the football here for the Chiefs, a spot that kind of was slow to start, had some issues early in the year, but man, have they hit their stride as of late. And I know how great Chris Jones has been, and there's so much to talk about when it comes to Chris Jones. But I actually want to focus on here first, Jesse. George Karlaftis is turning a corner and has played so great as of late. What have you seen of the development of Karlaftis this year, and how do you think the rookie has gone from week 1 here in the NFL through all 18 weeks of the regular season and now into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think if you talk to coaches about this, whether it's Joe Cullen, the defensive line coach, or even Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, Chris Jones mentioned this after last game, is that with Karlaftis, they liked what he was doing earlier in the season. And obviously he's known for his motor, but it felt like the opportunities he had for sacks, he wasn't finishing. You know what I mean? He wasn't getting the guy on the ground. The last few weeks, that's what's changed, is that he's still giving the same pursuance of the quarterback. He's still in the right spot, but yet now he's getting guy on the ground and is starting to add the production to that. And so, you talk about whatever it is, I think it's 6 sacks in the last 7 weeks for him after 1 in the first, whatever it was, 11 or 10 weeks. So you're starting to see those numbers ramp up, and all of a sudden, those are the sorts of things that makes this defensive line. It kind of flips it from, okay, it's an okay one, it's a solid one, can bring some pressure with a 4-man rush, but you probably still want to blitz some pretty often, to like, this is starting to be pretty good for the Chiefs. You can rotate in Carlos Dunlap, who bats down passes, and you've got Frank Clark, who quietly has played his best probably since his first year in Kansas City. And then you talked about the wrecker inside and Chris Jones, who you basically have to double team, and even when you do that, there's no guarantee that you're going to keep him off of a quarterback. And Michael Dana's stepped up lately and had some bright moments as well. So all of a sudden, you look at this 4-man pass rush, and you've seen Steve Spagnuolo has not blitzed as much here in the last 3 or 4 weeks. They'll heat it up a lot on these young quarterbacks, but they have not had to rely on blitzes as much as they did early in the season when they were sort of gambling because the pass rush is coming home. All of a sudden, you get a consistent George Karlaftis, and I do want to add he has been more consistent and better in the run game as well, which helps the Chiefs out just the same. When you get that greater consistency from him, it's like the rising tide lifting all boats here. It helps the Chiefs offense the Chiefs defense in so many different ways, and helps that defensive line. And again, if you take a little bit of that and say, now you don't have to blitz as much, well, you're given more security on the back end. All of a sudden the Chiefs don't have to gamble. And when you don't have to gamble, things can just be more sound defensively. So his emergence has been good and come at a really bright spot for the Chiefs. And the last 2 weeks have been a great indication of what kind of a difference maker he can be. He continues the trajectory he has here in the last few weeks and few months.
Consistent complementary pass rush is something the Chiefs haven't had in a while, and it's great to see coming up here down the stretch. I want to stick with the young guys. The Chiefs drafted a lot of young corners, and then after they traded Rashad Fenton midseason, it went into, you got L'Jarius Sneed and the rookies back there. That was, a good chunk of that cornerback room in the secondary. How have you seen these young players progress in? Did you expect when the Chiefs kind of made the signal of, all right, young guys, you rookies, it's your show, it's your time to really step up and contribute? Did you expect them being able to play kind of as well as they have? And what have you seen out of the young guys in the back end this year?
Yeah, you can't overstate how big it is that like Jalen Watson as a 7th round pick is a third cornerback and has performed pretty well lately. That's huge when you get those hits on the draft. I mean, that's where the Chiefs were different this year. They drafted 10 guys, they kept 10 guys. I mean, that doesn't happen in the NFL. You draft 10 guys usually, and okay, these 2 guys, training camp didn't turn out the way you thought. You cut them. Okay, there's a guy during the season, he doesn't pan out. Whatever, that guy goes away. I mean, all of a sudden by the end, you feel good if you have 2 or 3 legitimately good players. But the Chiefs, it's like the cohesion between the front office coaching staff and kind of being on the same page. All those guys are still around. All those guys are still with the Chiefs. And so, McGuffey getting healthy, it was a big deal for the Chiefs. He's just been solid across the board. He's been exactly what they wanted. He's a solid NFL cornerback, 1st round pick from day one, and that's what they needed. They needed some security at that position, and they really haven't devoted resources in the 1st round under Brett Veach to that position until now, and that's turned out well for them. But you see Brian Cook get more comfortable in there. Jalen Watson, as I said, they've got Joshua Williams in case you have a certain type of matchup, a taller receiver that you want to go against. Those guys are playing with more physicality and jamming guys to the line. They did that very well against the Raiders last week. But I also would like to spotlight safeties too. That was a real weakness for them earlier in the season. And Juan Thornhill had the interception last week, and Justin Reed, ever since the Cincinnati game, has just completely turned his season around, has been one of the top rated safeties according to Pro Football Focus in the entire NFL in that, past 6 or 7 weeks. So it really is seemingly coming together. Now, things can change in the playoffs, and obviously the Chiefs will play most likely one of their best quarterback matchups in that AFC Championship should they make it that far, whether it's Joe Burrow or Josh Allen. So things can go awry in a hurry. But I think at this point, you have to be happy if you're a Chiefs fan with how this thing has turned out, how everything that they hoped would turn out, the Chiefs, that is, did, and how they put faith and trust in these young guys to develop and come along. And that's basically what's happened, thanks to the coaching staff and thanks to those guys getting better and better each week. So the back end of the Chiefs has played really well lately, and a lot of guys it's taken for them to come together to do that. But that's exactly how it's fallen, and that's exactly part of the reason that the Chiefs defense has seemed to be on the rise here in the last few weeks.
It's a great thing to see for sure. My final two questions here for you, Jesse, are two for the road. First things first, Jake and I were trying to break this down. There's 4 real potential opponents for the Chiefs in the divisional round. They'll either face the Dolphins, the Ravens, the Chargers, or the Jaguars. Of those 4 teams, which is the one you would least want to face if you were the Kansas City Chiefs coming up in the divisional round?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the obvious answer. I think it's the Chargers. Not probably for the reasons that I hear the most often, which is people saying, well, they play the Chiefs tough. And I would mostly just say, look, the Vegas line is right now Chargers by 2.5, even though the game against the Jaguars is in Jacksonville. So that tells me that the market and the very smart people out there think that the Chargers are about 4 points better than the Jaguars. And so I would still envision the Chiefs would be a 7-ish point favorite at home against the Chargers. And every time the Chargers play the Chiefs, they play their A to A+ game. So I just don't envision that happening a third straight time, just because I don't know, for whatever reason, the Chargers just seem to play lights out against the Chiefs. I just don't think that's something you can expect to continue. But at the same time, if you're going to get a 4-point advantage, and if one team would be, you'd be a 7-point favorite against, another one you'd be a 9 or a 10-point favorite against, or 11-point favorite against, you're obviously going to take the 11. So I think Chiefs fans would definitely should be Jacksonville Jaguar fans this weekend. And a little bit scary with Doug Peterson. He has a coaching history, obviously, this has taken a team and won a Super Bowl, and Trevor Lawrence is coming on at the right time. But if Vegas says that one team is about 4 points better than the other, then you're talking about margins here, and the Chiefs want to take the easiest of those picks. And the easier of those two would be Jacksonville. So I think the Chargers out of those 4 teams would be the toughest opponent in Week 1. And if nothing else, would definitely have the Chiefs' attention. They would not be overlooking the Chargers based on those 2 games that they played them earlier this year.
I'm right there with you, Jesse. That is the team, and Jake is there as well. We both think the Chargers are probably the toughest opponent the Chiefs had to face. My last thing here for you, Jesse, there's a chance we're going to have a neutral site AFC title game. If it ends up being Chiefs and Bills, it'd be the neutral site, and the neutral site was announced today being in Atlanta. If we get that far and it goes to a neutral site game, if it's successful monetarily, do you think the NFL will move forward and at some point make all AFC and NFC title games neutral sites in the future?
It depends. I would think no, because the owners would have to sign off on that. And there's something the owners really love, which is the gate from the AFC Championship game. I can imagine Clark Hunt really liking when 80,000 people swallow up tickets in about 12 minutes to go to the AFC Championship game at Arrowhead. Not to mention, teams earning that sort of right. But we'll see. I mean, so much of this can be narrative driven, and once things change a little bit, we can see they sometimes change permanently. And that Chiefs-Bills game would have the potential to be an amazing game with sort of a college atmosphere. If you have the stadium that's Chiefs fans and half the stadium that's Bills fans. So I will not say no absolutely, because if that game is just crazy and the atmosphere is crazy and it feels like a college football game, the NFL could move forward and say that's something that they like. But as I said, when there are owners involved, there's money involved. And when there's money involved, the owners want to be involved. So this seems like a one-off to me, and that we'll go back to normal next year and everything will kind of remain the same. But we'll see. We'll see what happens if that game is played, and if the NFL and owners seem to like that sort of setup. I would doubt it, but crazier things have happened in the past. So we'll have to wait and see how those 60 minutes potentially turn out.
I'm with you. I would like to think they wouldn't change, and owners would want to keep that home gate. But when money involves, crazier things have happened for sure. Jesse, thank you so much for joining me today and chatting up the Chiefs with us. It's always great to have you on, my man. And enjoy the bye week. Enjoy a little bit of a weekend to yourself here, and hopefully it's a nice long playoff run that you get to see you go to the Super Bowl in Glendale to cover the Chiefs coming up when the season's over.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah, appreciate having me.
No, that is Jesse Newell of the Kansas City Star. Always fun to have Jesse on. It is always a blast to have him on to chat Chiefs and anything else. Just an absolute pleasure. We'll take a time out here on Mic'd Up. We'll have a run of the show coming up next. Welcome back into Mic'd Up as we move close to wrapping up today's show. Fulton Caster here with you as we move things to close out as Jake is on the road to Joplin, Missouri for some Washburn hoops. Coming up this evening on our sister station, Country 1069. Jake traveling down there. Joplin's not the worst trip we've had to take. That one definitely wasn't as close to as bad as other trips we had to take for football. But still, the ride down is slightly boring, but not as boring as it could easily be. But overall, not that bad. I want to thank Jesse Newell of the Kansas City Star for coming on and chatting some Chiefs football. It's a pleasure. There's a level of sad of Jesse being off the KU beat that it, took away our weekly Jayhawk weekly conversations. But at the same time, Jesse, no matter what he's doing, does great work. And we'll always find time to chat with Jesse when we can. I wanted to discuss here as we move to wrap up today's show. There's a lot of head coaching vacancies, and by a lot, I mean 5 that are happening in the NFL, a lot less than we've normally seen. And we're starting to get to that point in the cycle where interviews are beginning to be scheduled for in-person situations. And we're entering the part of the calendar of the NFL year where people can start having in-person interviews for head coaching replacements. And with that, the Denver Broncos have scheduled a pair of in-person interviews for Tuesday in Los Angeles. They're going to interview Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the LA Rams. Good option, a potential option for them as their head coach. But then the more important one, they have an in-person interview scheduled with Sean Payton. And that has been their kind of big one that's been being reported around. And Sean Payton has more than a couple of teams that have floated with some interest in trying to get him from the Saints. The problem there, if you're trying to hire Sean Payton, is not only are you trying to get him to agree to be your head coach, you have to offer something to the Saints. You have to trade for him like a player, because when he retired, he still was under contract with the Saints. If you're the Broncos, what do you have left to give up? They gave up so much in that Russell Wilson trade. They have a few assets back from the Bradley Chubb trade with Miami. But overall, you're strapped if you are Denver for that. And more importantly, if you're Sean Payton, and I want to clarify, this is not me trying to take shots at Denver, but what about that situation would incentivize you to come out of retirement? If it was just a situation where, Peyton wanted to, take the year off, then come back, it's kind of whatever. He needed to step away from the game for a little bit. That's one thing. But what about that situation would make you want to have to put up with it? You'll have to do something to fix the locker room, because they're like, I think the culture may have gotten better the last 2 games because they fought harder, but those are just, interesting circumstances to say the least. But I mean, your offensive line stinks. Your quarterback, maybe showed some signs in those final 2 games, but on the season as a whole, Russell Wilson looked like he's desperately going to need to be fixed in some way in the offseason. Your star young running back in Javonte Williams is going to be coming off a torn ACL. That changes everything. Tim Patrick, a wide receiver you really liked and was one of the better wide receiver 3s in the league. He's coming off a torn ACL. Don't know how he's going to be. Cortland Sutton still trying to find himself in a real groove after he tore his ACL recently. Jerry Jeudy is talented, but a head case and a problem child off the field. Your defense has some pieces that are nice, but some pieces that aren't. It's just, I keep seeing all these reports about the Broncos wanting Sean Payton. And it just is a fit that seems illogical to me based on what Denver would have to give up to get him from New Orleans, which means you're already hemorrhaging your assets that you need to fix your team. And if you're Sean Payton, what about that situation is attractive to you? Because also, if you think about it, you're also trying to create a team to compete with the Chiefs, which I know, coaches will say and players will say they never shy away from a challenge. And that's fair. And there are challenges wherever you go. There truly are. But if Mike McCarthy gets fired in Dallas and Sean Payton took that job, you know what you don't have to deal with if you're, coaching the Dallas Cowboys? The best quarterback in the NFL in your division. You know what happens if the Saints, for some reason, wanted to fire Dennis Allen and go right back to Sean Payton? You know what you don't have to deal with in the NFC South? The best quarterback in football in your division, because Tom Brady's probably not going to be in Tampa Bay after this year. You know what you have to deal with if you go to Denver? Trying to beat Mahomes twice a year. Like, it's all of those factors together just make that fit so odd to me. It just feels like it's not the move. But it goes along with what Denver thinks. Dan has mentioned on 580 Sports Talk plenty of times, and he's more in the know with Denver. Being a Denver guy, being from the area, he seems to have much more of a familiar situation than a lot of us other year. The 580 Sports team, they have a savior complex. That's what Peyton Manning was, and it worked when he came in. But I think Dan is right when that's kind of what they're trying to do. And maybe with Sean Payton, it was the thing with Russell Wilson. When it's like they got a lot more problems than just needing a new head coach with a better vision. I don't know if Sean Payton's the answer. At this point, with everything coming out, maybe that's what Denver finds a way to do. But if they do, I don't know if that's the proper situation. But just every time I see it, it just makes me shake my head. But we're moving into the position where we're going to hear a lot more about head coach interviews. In-person interview windows are about to begin to open up, coming up late, going into early next week. Colts need a head coach. Jeff Saturday's technically going to be a candidate, according to Chris Ballard, though I really, if they do that move, my God, they're stupid. But Colts need a coach. Denver needs a coach. Carolina needs to make a decision on their head coaching search. I don't know what these teams are going to do. Houston needs to figure out what they want to do, but it is sure going to be interesting going forward with whatever teams end up going with. But a smaller head coaching carousel than we've normally seen at this time. Don't know if we're going to have any surprise firings going forward that changes things up. Don't know what Arizona is going to do as well. But overall, it should be a small but still fun head coaching carousel and head coaching search cycle coming up this NFL offseason. We'll take we'll take another timeout. Coming up next, the Chiefs pass rush is getting better. We'll look at some of the big symptoms, including the play of George Karlaftis, coming up next. Wrapping up this edition of Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. The Kansas City Chiefs pass rush and defense as a whole, not even just special, the defense as a whole is really finding their groove at just the right time. We talk about you want to be a good team overall and you want to have a good regular season, but a big key to being able to go far in the playoffs. And I think we talk about the Chiefs all the time, because we discussed it when the idea of, the offense playing an intentional C+ game or the basic stuff with the idea of, well, you can just turn it on when you need to. Well, there's a worry of, can you end up doing it? So it's best when you can play at that very top tier level on your way in, that the switch has already been flipped. And defensively, it has. The entire defense playing well, but more specifically, this Chiefs pass rush is on a roll. Again, from weeks 14 through 18, the Chiefs had the 5th highest quarterback pressure rate at 34.5% in the NFL. And that completely coincides with really the stride of George Karlaftis. A sack in 6 of his last 7 games, pressures and quarterback hits and a tackle for loss in every single 7 of those games. Him finding a groove, I talk about it at length, and I know you all are probably sick of hearing me talk about it at this point, but complementary pass rush is so important because it's something that I don't think is talked about enough in the overall context of pass rush in the NFL. We talk about just, there's one guy blowing it up and he's doing great, and that's why a team's good. We talk about how well Dallas played and their pass rush and Philly's pass rush. Well, part of the reasons that there's this, especially Philly. Philly is 4 players with 10+ sacks. It's the complementary unit. It's you don't know who's it going to be because they all win at once. I've talked about it. We always think about how, when the Chiefs play the Bengals, bad offensive line. Joe Burrow's always running around. He's never at home. He's never getting hit. And then Chiefs never get home because only one guy's winning. And so Joe Burrow has all these escape valves and escape routes. But when you have multiple players win, it limits the escape routes and the safety valves and the way quarterbacks can get away. And that's what's made the Chiefs so successful as of late against teams like the Raiders. When they had this high sack totals against Denver, even when they were limiting Houston a little bit, though the sack numbers weren't fully there against Houston, they played well against Seattle. It's multiple guys winning at once, which makes things more difficult. It's Karlaftis playing well. It's Mike Dana playing a lot better. Even Colin Saunders a little bit, getting a little bit of love out here with how well that he's been playing as a bit. Frank Clark as well, and hopefully he gets healthy going into the playoffs here. The Chiefs defense goes as Chris Jones goes. If 95 has a big day, that defense is going to play well. If 95 gets shut down, normally things don't go as well. But a big part of what he's been able to do and why I think has led, Chris Jones has done great and he's taken a step forward. And, the 15.5 sacks is due to a lot of great work by him, some great coaching by Joe Cullen coming in to be the defensive line coach this year. But overall, I think Chris Jones has also helped by he has helped not getting home around him as much, though he has, Mike Dana, George Karlaftis, Frank Clark have gotten home 5 sacks at least for each of those 3. But they're just winning their matchups. If they aren't getting home, they're making it harder for quarterbacks to escape and make it easier for Jones to get home. It also makes them think about and makes opposing offensive and offensive lines have to really consider the way they want to scheme against the Chiefs because they now know, it used to be very simple. You put 2 guys on Chris Jones, try and take him out, we're good to go. Well, now you have that thought if we're going to put 2 guys on Chris Jones, that's 1-on-1 for Karlaftis. That's 1-on-1 for Mike Dana. That's 1-on-1 for Frank Clark. And now those guys are winning those 1-on-1 battles. And that is so huge for what the Chiefs are going to try and do going forward. I'm intrigued at how they're going to run through the playoffs and how well they're going to play. 95, Chris Jones is still going to have a big impact on how good this defense plays coming up in the playoffs, no matter who they face and who they face over these 3 games. But what is more important than even how Chris Jones plays is can Karlaftis and Dana and Clark and Saunders keep this up? Can Carlos Dunlap keep up his solid play and be utilized more, even more of a higher snap count in the playoffs? Do they find a way to wreak havoc? Because like what Jesse said earlier this hour, when those guys were forming, Spagnuolo has to blitz less. When Spags has to blitz less, it helps to make the secondary stronger because not everyone's left on an island as much. The entire unit works together, and when that pass rush gets solved and it performs well, the entire unit can play at such a higher level, and it makes the Chiefs that much more dangerous to deal with coming up in the NFL playoffs. We'll see what happens next week when the divisional round begins and the Chiefs finally have to get on the field. But overall, with the way the stride the defense is hitting, if they keep it up, there's a good chance the Chiefs will at least be back trying to play for another Super Bowl title in the Patrick Mahomes era. We'll take our final time out here on Mic'd Up. Coming up next, we'll wrap things up with the mic drop. Wrapping up today's edition of Mic'd Up with the mic dropping. For me, it's simple. MLB is finally making a move that signifies maybe they understand they need to make their game more accessible. I've always said it's part of the problem. Their poor marketing and lack of marketing of their stars is number one. But the fact that it's so hard to watch their product at all is one of those big issues. I don't know if they're going to solve it fully. I don't know how they're going to try and implement the way to fix it. But the fact that they made a hire and made a division to look into it means at least they understand that a problem exists. And that's the first step to fixing any problem, is you have to admit that one exists. I don't know when the day will come that they fix it, but overall, I'm at least happy that they're going to try and put their game, make it more accessible, because maybe the game I love will actually finally be loved by more people ever again. Who knows what they'll do? Knowing them, they'll probably find a way to screw it up. But overall, I'm going to hold out hope for at least just a little while longer. They might get this one right. That'll do it for Mic'd Up today. Jake and myself will be back together. We will finally have another normal show with Jake and myself coming up on tomorrow's show. Coming up next on 580 WIBW, 580 Sports Talk with Brendan and Dan. You all have a great rest of your days.